Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking about fraud and how it fits in the realm of AP automation. My guests for this conversation are Ciara Lindgren, a senior fraud analyst at Paymerang, and Tiffany Allen, channel program director at KwikTag by Paymerang. KwikTag recently joined the Paymerang family, and they are the sponsor of this episode. Ciara and Tiffany give us some constructive recommendations on how to fight fraud in AP automation with a specific focus on Dynamics GP and Dynamics 365 Business Central. 2/3 of companies have dealt with some sort of AP fraud event, whether by email, check, or wire fraud. And my guests help us understand what security measures you can take to fight back. We discuss different types of fraud, industry-specific concerns, the layers of protection that organizations can set up, and some of the measures that Paymerang and KwikTag have taken to safeguard sensitive financial information. All right, well, Ciara Lindgren, Tiffany Allen, welcome to both of you. Our listeners are likely familiar with KwikTag, but not everyone might know Paymerang well yet. Can you tell us more about Paymerang and what it means that KwikTag has joined the company?
Jason, it's so a pleasure to be here. Super excited to participate in the program here today. And yeah, Paymerang, we were acquired by Paymerang back in April. It's been a super exciting venture for the KwikTag team. In all reality, it really just puts a perfect little bow around the AP automation process for KwikTag and Paymerang customers. Obviously, the value that we brought to the Paymerang organization is we've been leveraging AI-powered data extraction, invoice automation solutions richly integrated to the Microsoft Dynamics products. And Paymerang has been providing payment automation solutions to over 100 different ERPs. So what we blend together here is definitely being more unique and exclusive in that Microsoft Dynamics niche of being able to go end to end. You know, I'm talking invoice capture all the way through to payment reconciliation. So for us, that's super exciting. For the Paymerang team, I think they're loving the opportunity, obviously, to get deeper into the Microsoft Dynamics channel, especially with all the growth that we're seeing around D365 Business Central. So it's been really exciting, super fun story. And I would say we're definitely better together.
I wanted to discuss, and I know you wanted to discuss, security and risk-related topics today. Can you discuss security measures that are implemented by Paymerang and KwikTag to safeguard sensitive financial information? Ciara, why don't I bring you in here?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are so many different companies that do the exact same thing that we do. What we have realized is when you send over account information or want to change the way that your payment is made, usually people just input that information into their ERP system or just make that change without doing any verification. So the one thing that sets us apart from everyone else is actually doing a phone verification. So anytime someone wants to change the way that they're receiving their payment or update banking information, we actually pick the phone up and we call that vendor and confirm everything over the phone. And that's just because email compromises are an all-time high. So we want to make sure that the payment that's being sent to us and trusted in us to send to someone else, we want to make sure that it actually gets to that other place.
Ciara, I am so thankful that we have the human touch infused into the process, especially for the KwikTag side of things. You know, obviously, payment automation has been a gap for our customers for quite some time. So we've worked with other payment automation providers for our clients. And that human touch is obviously, I think, a key differentiator for us and is truly, hugely impactful in identifying and minimizing fraud. The one thing about that KwikTag kind of brings into this beautiful better together marriage here is that we've been leveraging technology to impact, and minimize fraud with technology. So our solutions leverage an AI data extraction tool that actually extracts all of the information. We read an invoice like a human eye would, so we extract all the details for that vendor off the invoice. So not just the name that they print on the invoice, but we look for address and phone number. And then we match it back to Dynamics. And if we don't see that it's an exact match, we actually flag that invoice as it's in the APQ. And when I say flag, we literally use a traffic light system. Green is good. We know it's an exact match for vendor name, phone number, and address. But if it's not, we're going to flag it. We're going to make it either yellow or red. If we have one element that's off, it's going to be yellow. If we have two elements that are off, it's red. And that's going to ensure that AP takes a look at that vendor detail. If it doesn't match, we're absolutely flagging them in that invoice automation process. out of the gate. Now, Sierra's team definitely takes it to the nth degree with the human verification, but trying to leverage that technology component along with their human interaction as well.
What are some of the potential consequences of security breaches that are at the top of your list when you are helping customers to avoid them?
Yeah, so obviously every attack is going to have a different consequence. What I want to talk about is a ransomware attack. We're seeing small organizations and large organizations, especially education facilities and healthcare facilities, victims of ransomware attacks. A ransomware attack is the average downtime is about 22 days. So can you imagine your organization being down and not able to do anything for 22 days? And there are a lot of fines that are associated with these as well. So if for some reason you pay someone that's on the Office of Foreign Assets Control list, they're very hefty fines, usually in the millions of dollars. There's lawsuits that could happen, your loss of customers, there's a lot of brand damage. So it really just depends on the type of attack and the breach that you're dealing with. But most of our organizations are seeing a huge uptick in ransomware attacks. And that's where we just have to pay really close attention to the emails that you're receiving and the directions and instructions that are in those emails.
What are some of the differences between a business email compromise and vendor impersonations?
Yeah, so a business email compromise and a vendor impersonation, they really have the same goal in mind. What they want to do is reroute funds to a fraudulent account. But there is a slight difference. So the difference between the two is a business email compromise is going to look like it's coming from the real email address or the real domain of that business. I like to use Paymerang as an example. So our domain is Paymerang, Paymerang.com. So if anybody within our organization was to send you an email, that's where it would come from. A business email compromise, it's going to look just like that. So they're really hard to detect, but usually you can see some grammatical errors. The communication back and forth between you and your real vendor is not normal. But the difference between the two, a vendor impersonation, the domain is not real. It's designed to trick our accounting folks or anybody that's receiving these emails. So Paymerang again, it's Paymerang. But if you were to use a lowercase n and an R together, that does look like an M. So the fraudsters are using different letters combined together to look like others. Sometimes they'll use 0 in place of an O or a capital I in place of a lowercase L. So the one thing that we always remind people, it's just so important to make sure that you're paying attention to the domain, the grammar in the emails, and that you're reading that email from top to bottom. The fraudster is bound to make an error somewhere within there. And sometimes you can even see that the domain has changed several times within that thread. So just make sure that you're paying really close attention to the email domains and then the entire thread of the email.
Are there industries where you're seeing the most fraud?
I honestly can't narrow it down to one specific industry. We're seeing fraud across all of our verticals. The ones that are being impacted the most by business email compromises and vendor impersonations are the education industry and our healthcare industry. And a lot of that is because they have larger invoices to pay. A lot of them are doing big construction projects. And one of the things that we're seeing are fraudulent invoices. And the really difficult thing about this is the education facility or a hospital, most of them have several different departments. And what they're doing is they're receiving an invoice from one department. They're assuming that department has done their due diligence and verified everything. And that's not the case. So then when it gets to our accounting departments, they're just paying the invoice. So we just got to make sure that the invoices that we're receiving are legitimate. Did we actually receive the service or the good for what we're paying the invoice for? So really, any organization is a target. Doesn't matter if it's a small mom and pop run business or a large multi-billion-dollar organization. A fraudster's out to get money. So as long as you pay invoices, you're definitely a target.
All right. So I think you've touched on this a little bit, but can you talk a little more about departments that are being the most affected in these types of industries?
Sarah, I'll take this one. I actually have a personal story here that's kind of interesting, spanning back 10 years ago. I don't think it's any surprise that the AP department is typically the most targeted by the business email compromise. Over 58% of fraud, falls into that category. But it doesn't mean other departments are immune. Think procurement, HR, AR, even the executive team. We do biweekly calls with the Paymerang group, and it is shocking to me to hear how many, emails are being sent directly to our CEO that are fraudulent, trying to get them to pay or make modifications to invoices. But in my personal case, 10 years ago, I remember vividly, we were subject of an email compromise and our AP manager did catch it. And it definitely alerted, or I guess, had her spidey sense popped up. And she was we were a remote organization, right? So she was emailing our owner. She was texting me like, hey, Tiff, this seems like an odd request from, and I was like, that does. So it really, you've got to be thankful for those people that are reading through those emails, making sure that you are asking those questions. And even if you cannot walk across the hall to ask somebody a question, pick up the phone, send that text message, do a follow-up email, because second guessing that behavior is really just going to turn into truly savings for your company. It also made us look at, obviously, we are an invoice automation company. It really made us look at our internal practices and policies to rethink about how we could leverage technology to, help find these errors, or not errors, I shouldn't say, but these occurrences. And I think one of the best ways that we see that now is leveraging the artificial intelligence, the AI, and making sure that we are matching things back to the ERP.
You've covered quite a few of the types of threats. Is there anything else you would add about really key threats that our listeners should know about when it comes to AP fraud?
Yeah, it's just so important for our AP departments to understand that even though we're receiving an email that we think is a legitimate email from a vendor, there is a potential that it's a business email compromise or a vendor impersonation. And we've just got to be really, really careful. If we don't pay attention to these emails that we receive, we can definitely fall victim to an attack. And usually on average, it's about $15,000 for just a small loss. We see them every day where we'll see a fraudulent invoice, or we'll see these business email compromises and vendor impersonations. And they're up to like $1.5, $1.8 million. This could shut down a whole organization. We have seen news articles recently where they were a victim of a business email compromise and they lost $1.8 million and the business had to shut their doors. So just advice is just to make sure that we're reading that email, we're doing our due diligence, and back to Tiffany's point, we're picking up the phone, we're calling people to make sure that it's right, or we're getting up from our desk and walking over to confirm the legitimacy of those requests.
Well, what are some of the layers of fraud protection that are available or that you recommend?
Yeah. So one thing that I come across on a daily basis when I'm talking with organizations is a lot of people don't know what positive pay is, or they don't have that feature. Positive pay is something that you should have if you issue checks within your organization. So if a check is stolen, you do have some sort of recourse with positive pay because you're able to review these exceptions and clear them. So back to my point, a lot of organizations don't know that this is a product that exists. And if they do, then they're just, I don't think I need it. But check fraud, unfortunately, is the highest. And the reason being is because we write so many checks. And that's an easy thing for fraudsters to do, is steal a check out of a mailbox and wash it. So just make sure that you have positive pay on your checks. We also review high-risk payments. So make sure you're reviewing your high-risk payments. Make sure you're looking at them. Make sure that the account that you sent the payment to last time is the same. Just make sure you verify. I can't stress how important it is to do a phone verification and make sure that the legitimate vendor is receiving those funds.
Do you have any advice for organizations that process their own payments?
Yes. I know I've said this a couple of times. Make sure you're looking at the domains. If you receive an email, question new invoices. We see a lot of fraudulent invoices. We usually see about 2 every day. Question them. Ask, have you received the service? Have you gotten the goods that you've paid for? Call the vendor by the number that you have on file, not the number that's in the email that's being sent to you. Look for grammatical errors. If you issue checks within your organization, make sure you have positive pay. So those are just a couple of the things, but the most important thing is just ask questions. Never assume that the invoice or the email that you received is legitimate.
All right. Well, I want to look to the future too while I had you both here. Over the next couple of years, what do you think will be the biggest trends in security?
Yeah, so I'll start. Fraud's a multi-billion-dollar industry. That's what they do for a living. They're trying to use that money that they get to outsmart us. They're coming up with new schemes every day. And sometimes it's really hard for us, our fraud professionals, to keep up with them. I do think that we're going to see a huge uptick in ransomware attacks. I've seen it recently. Right now, there's about a ransomware attack every 11 seconds. That's a successful one. Think about all of the unsuccessful ones. They're just getting a lot smarter than we are. We need to ensure that we're doing everything that we can to keep our organization safe. One of the things that I'm famous for, that little pop-up that comes up on your screen, especially 12 o'clock on a Friday, where it says to download the most up-to-date software. Make sure you're doing that. I know it's annoying, but make sure that you're downloading the most up-to-date software in case you do click on a link that's malicious. At least you do have some firewall protection by downloading that correct software. And then just make sure you're verifying everything that comes through your inbox. Business email compromises, that's been a thing for many, many, many years. And I don't think that's ever going to stop. It's an easy way for a fraudster to just quickly get funds. Usually a business email compromise, the fraudster will have the funds usually within an hour to 2 hours because we just immediately send a wire transfer or reroute that ACH. So it's an easy way for them to get money. It's been around for years and I don't see that ever stopping. It's probably just getting a lot more traction now. And that's why we're seeing it so much because the dollar amount has actually gone up. So the average about business email compromise, like I said, is about 15,000, but it ranges from about 15,000 to anywhere in the multi-million-dollar range.
You know, guys, it's crazy. We are talking about fraud, and I'm going to say there is some good news in here. There really is, because we have a lot of data to support and continue to educate. So I think that what we're going to continue to see is greater awareness of organizations around how they can protect themselves. The one thing that, we know is the payment method that is most subjected to fraud is check, 66% versus the virtual card, 3%. So as we continue to educate all businesses of, how they can minimize their risk, I think we are going to see a greater adoption rate of payment automation services. People know that they need to obviously protect themselves, but also lessen the burden of issuing those checks. It's very time consuming, challenging process already. And then when you layer on top of it, 66% of fraud is coming through the check. How can we lessen our dependency there? So I think organizations are going to continue to look for solutions from payment automation providers such as ourselves. And I also think we are continuing to leverage innovation to ensure all organizations, all types and sizes of companies can take advantage of these tools to lessen their risk. Payment automation is truly not out there just for those organizations that are, the multi-million-dollar organization. So if you think you can't afford it, rethink that. Have these conversations, educate yourself on how you can minimize your risk internally and look externally to see who could help support minimizing that fraud risk.
All right, excellent. I have to agree. I think that the combination of technology and some good education is really the answer here. I know for our listeners and for me, just hearing some of the latest findings from Paymerang on this is certainly really useful. I want to thank both of you for being here today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Ciara and Tiffany for joining me. For more information on some of the topics discussed in today's conversation, please see the links in the show notes or visit paymerang.com for more details. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on social media. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.